The pen hovered just above the paper. A single stroke away from a signature worth over $400 million. The room smelled of leather chairs, stale espresso, and silent pressure. Every eye was on him. Every breath in the conference room was held hostage by the tension between the tip of that pen and the dotted line it hadn't yet touched. Ethan Caldwell didn't move. He couldn't. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something quiet and electric that had gripped the base of his spine and whispered, "Not yet. Not like this." That morning had begun like any other at the Caldwell Tower, 49 floors of mirrored glass and ambition piercing the Manhattan sky. The boardroom on the top floor was pristine, flooded with diffused sunlight. Everything was curated, perfect, predictable, until she spoke. A voice from the door, sharp and soft at the same time, sliced through the ritual of the moment like a knife through velvet. "Stop. Don't sign that document." Silence. Then came the audible confusion, the flickers of movement, lawyers shifting in their chairs, executives turning their heads, faces tightening into disbelief. And there she was, a cleaning lady. In a pale gray uniform, with latex gloves still clinging to her fingers, standing just inside the doorway like a wrong note in a perfect song. She didn't belong there. And yet, for reasons no one could yet understand, not a single person told her to leave. Ethan looked at her. She was older than most people expected. Probably in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a practical bun, and her eyes, tired yes but clear, held something that didn't fit the setting, certainty. He lowered the pen. "Excuse me?" Ethan asked, his voice low and oddly calm. The woman stepped forward. Not timidly. Not defiantly. Just truthfully. As if she were doing something she didn't want to do, but had to. "My name is Rosa Jimenez," she said, her accent barely noticeable but undeniably present. "Southern Texas, perhaps, or the borderlands. I clean the offices on this floor. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know this isn't my place. But I couldn't let you sign that paper without telling you what I heard last night." A scoff came from the far end of the table. Mitchell Halberd, senior legal counsel for Voltrex, the acquiring company. His suit looked expensive. His expression, suddenly, did not. "This is absurd," he muttered, half rising. "Mr. Caldwell, this woman has no clearance to be." "Sit down," Ethan said quietly, not looking away from Rosa. And Halberd sat. It was that kind of moment. The kind where everything you thought was unshakable shifts. Where someone without a title, without wealth, without power, rewrites the script in real time. Rosa took another step forward. "Last night, I was cleaning the 14th floor. The Voltrex offices. It was late. After midnight. I thought I was alone." A tension crackled in the air. "I heard Mr. Halberd on the phone. He was talking to someone. I don't know who. He didn't see me. I was in the copy room behind the glass wall. He said." She paused, and something in Ethan's chest tightened, like a warning right before impact. "He said this acquisition was a front. That once it went through, Caldwell Biotech would be dismantled. Piece by piece. He said the patents would be sold overseas, the employees let go quietly, the research buried. He said you had no idea what you were giving up. That you were smart enough to build an empire, but too blind to see it being stolen from under you." His words. The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. More personal. Because Ethan Caldwell had built Caldwell Biotech from the ashes of his father's vision. What started in a borrowed garage in Queens had grown into one of the most respected biomedical research companies in the country. Not just for profit, but for purpose. Lives had been changed because of what his teams discovered. Medications for rare autoimmune conditions. Innovations in cancer detection. Hope. And now this woman, a janitor, was standing in his boardroom, looking straight at him, pulling a thread that unraveled everything. "You expect us to believe this?" barked one of the Voltrex executives. "She's a cleaning lady. She's probably misunderstood something, or... No, Rosa interrupted. Her voice didn't rise. It deepened, like the sound of ground breaking open. I heard what I heard. I've worked here 6 years. I've kept my head down. I've seen people come and go. I've heard things no one thought I could hear, because they didn't see me. But last night, I saw everything I needed to. I can't explain it more than that. But if you sign that document today, you'll lose something you can't get back. Something more important than money. Ethan looked down at the papers again. The acquisition was being pushed through aggressively. Voltrex had offered a price that made headlines. Everyone told him it was the smart move. Streamline. Reinvest. Expand into consumer biotech. This deal would take Caldwell Enterprises into a new league. But why had they moved so fast? Why the silence clauses? Why had they insisted the contract be signed today, with no extensions? The questions began to spiral inside him. Not chaos, not yet. But the first flares of doubt illuminating a path he hadn't walked before. Rosa stepped back. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't protesting. She had said what she needed to say. Now the weight was his. Ethan stood slowly, ignoring the murmurs, the shifting bodies, the air thick with disbelief and arrogance. He picked up the pen again. But this time, he didn't look at the document. He looked at Halberd. And Halberd flinched. A muscle in his jaw tightened. His hand twitched. And in that moment, it wasn't Rosa's words that convinced Ethan. It was Halberd's silence. Because guilt doesn't scream. It hides in stillness. Ethan turned toward the table. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "no one's signing anything today." A thunderclap of reactions surged around him. Voices rose. Lawyers threatened. Phones were pulled from pockets. The PR director muttered about damage control. Voltrex's lead negotiator demanded explanations, contracts, consequences. Ethan didn't care. He was already walking. And Rosa quietly stepped aside to let him pass. He paused beside her. "Thank you," he said, almost under his breath. She didn't reply. Just nodded, then turned and walked back toward the service elevator. As if she hadn't just changed the course of a corporation. As if she hadn't just lit a match in a dark room. But the story didn't end there. That was only the opening. Because what Rosa had overheard was only the surface of something deeper. And Ethan Caldwell, the man who had once believed his instincts were enough, was about to discover how wrong he had been. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft metallic sigh. Ethan stood in silence, watching the numbers descend. 49, 48, 47. His reflection in the polished steel walls looked unfamiliar. Something in his eyes had shifted. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. Disorientation. He had always believed that clarity was a product of data, that confidence was born from preparation. But right now, all he had was the hollow throb of a question that refused to be silenced. What the hell just happened? He didn't go to his office. He didn't call legal. Instead, he walked out of the building through the underground parking garage and stepped into the autumn air like a man abandoning something sacred. The city didn't notice. Taxis screamed past. Horns barked. Tourists fumbled with maps they didn't need. But for Ethan, the noise felt distant, like watching a movie from behind glass. A cleaning lady had just stopped a multi-million-dollar acquisition. And he had let her. No. That wasn't right. He had believed her. And the most disturbing part? He still did. He ducked into a narrow cafe 2 blocks from the office, the kind of place he hadn't stepped foot in since before his second promotion. No one there wore suits. The barista didn't know his name. The coffee was terrible. He sat in the back, alone, and pulled out his phone. But he didn't check his emails. He opened the internal employee database and typed, Rosa Jimenez. 1 result. Maintenance Division. Caldwell Tower. Employed since March 2019. No incidents. No complaints. 3 commendations from floor supervisors. A quiet record. Unremarkable. But something in that simplicity felt intentional. Like a book with too many blank pages. He hesitated for a long moment, then tapped the call button. It rang twice. Then went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Back at the tower, chaos was unfolding. He knew that. Legal would be scrambling. The press might already be sniffing around. Voltrex would be threatening lawsuits. But Ethan couldn't go back in yet. Not without understanding what Rosa knew. He needed to see her. Not at the office. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere real. The janitor had just challenged the most critical business decision of his career. And she had done it with calm eyes and a single sentence. That kind of courage doesn't come from nowhere. That kind of voice has roots. He left the cafe and walked. Past a man selling bootleg watches. Past 2 kids arguing about sneakers. Past a woman singing in Spanish under a rusted scaffolding. The noise of the city felt louder now. Rawer. And maybe for the first time in years, he wasn't above it. He was inside it. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated. Then answered. Mr. Caldwell? A woman's voice. Not Rosa. Yes. This is Anna. I work with the night crew. Rosa asked me to call you. Ethan stopped walking. Is she all right? She's cautious. She said she didn't want to use her own phone. Said it might be traced. She asked me to give you an address. She'll be there for the next hour. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. A coil of curiosity and dread. Tell me, he said. Anna gave him a location in the Bronx. Then hung up. The train ride north was slow, crowded, and disorienting. It smelled of old metal, body heat, and unspoken stories. Ethan stood the entire ride, one hand gripping the steel rail, the other shoved deep in his coat pocket, gripping nothing. He hadn't taken the subway in over a decade. The platform at East 149th Street buzzed with life. Dogs barking, children crying, voices rising and falling like waves. The city looked different from here. Less polished. More honest. He walked 2 blocks and found the building. It was old, but clean. A red brick complex with rusted fire escapes and painted murals of saints and sunsets. The kind of place where windows were always open, and people called each other by name. Rosa lived on the 3rd floor. She answered the door before he knocked. Like she had been waiting. She didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small but spotless. Warm lighting. A faint smell of lemon and detergent. Photographs lined the walls. Children, birthdays, family in matching outfits. A cross hung over the door. There was no television. Only books, a fan, and an old radio playing something soft in Spanish. You came, she said simply, motioning for him to sit. I had questions, he replied. I figured you would. He sat. She remained standing. I don't know what I walked into, Rosa, he began. But you seem to know more than what you said in that room. She nodded. I do. Then why didn't you tell me everything there? Her eyes darkened. Because the truth doesn't survive in places like that. Not when money's in the air. People don't hear in rooms built for profit. They calculate. They erase. I needed to speak somewhere your ears were open. The words landed heavy. Ethan leaned forward. So speak. She paused. Then said, without emotion. Voltrex doesn't want your company, Mr. Caldwell. They want what you buried inside it. They want what your father tried to hide 22 years ago. They've been planning this longer than you've been CEO. Ethan's breath caught. What are you talking about? Rosa sat across from him for the first time. and with the stillness of a confession, she said, "Your father wasn't just building medicine. He was trying to erase something. Something he created. Something that never should have existed." The room fell still. Outside, children shouted in the hallway. A dog barked somewhere across the street. The world carried on, unaware that a sentence, whispered inside a modest Bronx apartment, had just shattered the foundation of everything Ethan thought he knew. "Something he created?" Ethan asked, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "What do you mean?" Rosa didn't blink. "Your father wasn't just a scientist. He was a visionary. But visionaries often drift too close to the edge of ethics. And sometimes, they cross it." Ethan leaned forward, the weight of her words pressing on his ribs like bricks. "I need you to be specific." She stood, walked slowly to a worn cabinet in the corner, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a plain manila folder, no labels, no logos. She pulled it out and placed it gently on the coffee table between them. "I've been holding on to this for over 10 years, she said. "Waiting for the moment someone might finally need to see it." Ethan hesitated, then opened the folder. The pages were yellowing. Handwritten notes. Lab results. Internal memos. They were all marked with a version of the Caldwell Biotech letterhead from the early 2000s. His father's era. One memo stood out, dated March 14, 2003. Subject, Contingency Plan, Project Bellwether. Ethan froze. He'd never heard of it. "What is this?" Rosa sat again, folding her hands tightly in her lap. Bellwether was a research initiative hidden inside a larger program. Officially, it was about autoimmune therapies. But in practice, it was something else. Something dangerous. He read further. Phrases jumped off the page like screams in the dark. Unregulated gene expression pathways. Human trials initiated without federal notice. Unexpected cognitive side effects. "I don't understand," Ethan whispered. "Why would my father hide this?" Rosa looked straight into his eyes. "Because people got hurt. And not just test subjects. I was married once, Mr. Caldwell. My husband worked for your father. Not as a scientist, in security. He started noticing strange things. Files disappearing. Labs suddenly restricted. One night he came home and told me, 'If anything happens to me, look inside the floor vent beneath my locker.' The next morning, he was gone." Ethan's breath caught. "I'm sorry." She nodded, quietly. "I found the documents a week later. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand half of it. But I knew it was something your father wanted buried. And when he died, the company buried everything with him. But someone else found the scent." She leaned in now, voice tightening. "That's what Voltrex is after. Not your assets. Not your patents. They want Bellwether. They've known about it for years. Quietly collecting information. Tracking down the last people who knew. Halbert was just the middleman. There's someone else behind this. Someone who doesn't care about ethics. Or casualties." Ethan stared at the pages, the ink swimming before his eyes. He could barely hear the traffic outside anymore. "They knew I wouldn't sell if I knew," he said, his voice hollow. "They knew," Rosa confirmed. "And they counted on your silence. Your detachment. They knew you lived too far above the ground to see what was rotting underneath." Ethan looked up at her. A different kind of fire now behind his eyes. Not anger. Resolve. "I need to see everything. Every file. Every name. Every piece of this." Rosa reached back into the cabinet and handed him a second folder, thicker, heavier. Her eyes didn't leave his. "But you need to understand something," she said. "Once you open this, you can't unsee it. This isn't just about protecting your company anymore. It's about protecting people who don't even know they're in danger." He took the folder. held it with both hands. "I've been blind long enough," he said. And as he stood, a storm began to gather inside him. The kind that doesn't make noise at first, but always leaves something broken behind. The storm arrived before the rain. By the time Ethan stepped outside Rose's apartment, the sky had turned a violent gray, the wind restless with the weight of something unsaid. He clutched the folder to his chest like it could protect him, not from the weather, but from the truth it contained. He didn't call a driver. He didn't call anyone. He just walked. Each step echoing with fragments of words still crashing through his mind. Project Bellwether. Human trials. If anything happens to me. He couldn't make sense of all of it yet. The files were dense. Medical. Ethical. Illegally brilliant. But what chilled him wasn't the science, it was the intent behind it. His father hadn't just crossed a line. He had erased it. And now that buried line was coming back to the surface. By the time Ethan reached the main road, his phone was vibrating non-stop. He didn't answer. Not legal. Not his assistant. Not the CFO. He knew what they wanted: damage control, statements, spin. But this wasn't something that could be managed with words and PR filters. This was rot. And rot spreads in silence. He ducked into a cab and gave the driver an address he hadn't spoken aloud in years, his father's old townhouse on the Upper West Side. It had been sitting vacant since the estate was settled, untouched by the living and left to gather its own kind of dust. If there were answers, they'd be there. The cab ride was long. Long enough for questions to start chewing at the edges of his resolve. How many people knew? How many had helped bury it? And how much of the man he had idolized was built on a foundation of lies? He forced himself not to open the second folder yet. Not in the back of a moving car. He needed time. Space. He needed to be alone with it, and with whatever version of the past was about to crawl out of those pages. When he stepped out in front of the old townhouse, the street was quiet. Rain threatened above, the sky sagging under its own weight. The door creaked the way he remembered, and the lock still recognized the old key. The house smelled like age and memory. Faint leather. Dry wood. Dust dancing in the corners like ghosts who had no intention of leaving. He sat at the old study desk, his father's desk, and opened the folder. Inside were more than documents. There were photographs. One showed a young man strapped to a gurney, eyes wide with terror. Another showed a chart, spikes in neurological activity far beyond any normal threshold. There were transcripts of interviews with trial participants. Some of them sounded hopeful. Others didn't sound like themselves anymore. And one page in particular made Ethan's stomach drop. It was a letter. Handwritten. Unfinished. To my son, if you're reading this, it means the silence broke before I could. His eyes froze. He read on. There are things I've done that no father should pass on to his child. But there's a reason I hid Project Bellwether. Not because of what it was, but because of what it could be. It started with good intentions. But somewhere along the way, I lost control of the people behind it. I thought I could shut it down, but shutting it down didn't make it disappear. I should have burned everything. I didn't. That was my weakness. You'll have to do what I couldn't. Ethan dropped the page. He couldn't breathe. All these years, he believed he was carrying on his father's legacy. The innovation, the genius, the courage to do what others wouldn't. But now, it felt like he was inheriting a curse. The silence in the house shifted. Something subtle. The air changed. He wasn't alone. Footsteps. Soft. Deliberate. He turned. A man stood in the hallway. Not one of his people. Not anyone he recognized. The man smiled faintly. Not with warmth, with recognition. "We didn't expect you to find her," the man said calmly. "But now that you have, things will need to move faster." Ethan stood slowly, heart pounding. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. Let's just say I work with people who don't like secrets staying buried. He took a step forward. And Ethan understood something very clearly in that moment. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about survival. Ethan didn't move. The man in the hallway wasn't holding a weapon, not physically. But his presence was sharp, like a blade held against the truth. His calm, too rehearsed. His eyes, too still. I asked you a question, Ethan said. Who are you? The man stepped forward, casual, almost friendly. My name doesn't matter. But you should know this, everything you think you've uncovered? We've known for years. Rosa wasn't supposed to talk. But she did. And now you're in a position that makes people nervous. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. So that's it, he said. You come here to scare me into silence? No, the man replied, shaking his head slowly. Not scare you. Just remind you of the stakes. The world moves forward because people like your father took risks. The line between innovation and crime? It's thin and flexible. You're a businessman, Mr. Caldwell. You understand that better than most. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. My father tried to stop it. The man smiled faintly. And look where that got him. Something cold slid down Ethan's spine. He took a step back, subtly inching toward the desk where the folder still lay open. You killed him. The man didn't deny it. I'm not here to debate morality, he said. I'm here to offer you clarity. Sign the deal. Let Voltrex take the remnants of Bellwether quietly. We'll clean up the loose ends. Rosa disappears. The media never hears a word. And you go down in history as the CEO who made a bold, profitable decision. Everybody wins. Ethan didn't respond. But something inside him began to burn. Because for the first time in years, he understood, power wasn't in controlling the deal. Or in owning the building. Power was in deciding what you were willing to lose for what you believed in. He looked down at the letter from his father. The last words he'd ever written. You'll have to do what I couldn't. A pulse of conviction rose in Ethan's chest. No, he said quietly. The man blinked. Excuse me. I won't sign the deal. I won't let Voltrex bury this. And I won't pretend I didn't see what I saw. Silence. The man's expression darkened, just slightly. That's unfortunate. You really don't know what we're capable of, do you? I don't care, Ethan said. You want to silence me? You better do it now. Because the second I leave this room, everything in that folder goes public. I'll burn this company down if I have to, but I won't let you rewrite my father's legacy. Not like this. A beat passed. And something shifted. The man looked at him, eyes narrowing. Then slowly smiled again, but this time, there was no friendliness in it. Only calculation. You're not your father, he said. You still think there's a way to win this cleanly. There isn't. You'll see. Then he turned and walked out. Just like that. No threats. No violence. Just a shadow stepping back into the world, knowing that consequences don't always need to arrive in the form of a gun. Sometimes, they come in silence. In headlines. In whispers. In ruined reputations and erased names. The next morning, Ethan stood alone in the executive conference room. But this time, there was no pen in his hand. There was a camera. He looked directly into the lens. His voice steady. His chest tight with the weight of everything he was about to risk. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. This morning, I was supposed to finalize the sale of our biotech division to Voltrex Corporation. But I've chosen not to. What I'm about to share may end my career. It may destroy this company. But it needs to be said. He told the story. All of it. The documents. The hidden research. The unapproved trials. The deaths. The betrayal. He named names. including his own father's. And he ended with this: "There is no innovation worth building on the backs of silence, fear, and forgotten lives. We can do better. We must do better. And if I'm left standing alone at the end of this, so be it." Then he clicked upload. The video went live. The fallout came fast. Lawsuits, federal investigations, protests, board resignations. Voltrex backed out of the deal, officially, for undisclosed reasons. But behind closed doors, they turned vicious. Tried to smear Ethan. Tried to freeze his accounts. Tried to make Rosa disappear. They failed. Because Ethan had already made sure copies of the files had reached the right people: journalists, regulators, and 3 key senators with re-election campaigns that depended on looking ruthless on corruption. Truth, once spoken, spreads fast, and cannot be buried again. Caldwell Enterprises took a hit. Stock prices plummeted. Investors panicked. But something unexpected happened, too. People rallied. Former employees, medical researchers, patients who had once benefited from Caldwell's breakthroughs. They spoke up, and a narrative began to shift, from disgrace to integrity, from corporate greed to ethical reckoning. And Rosa, she didn't disappear. She was offered a formal position inside the company, head of ethics and employee welfare. She declined. "I don't need a title," she told Ethan. "I just needed to know someone was listening." 6 months later, Ethan sat in his father's old office, now restored, quiet, still smelling faintly of dust and something older. He looked out over the city. And for the first time, he didn't feel untouchable. He felt responsible. There was no applause, no medals, no grand reward. Just a man who had been handed a legacy full of cracks, and decided not to patch over them, but to break it open. To let the light in. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.